As you noted this morning, after the presidency handover, we discussed the decade progress reports from 7 countries. The reporting that started last year, you remember it was initiated by the Czech decade presidency, knowing that all governments report on their progress within the country, inside. But last year it was the first time to report to the International Steering Committee meeting. I don't want to remind you now on 2005 and the declaration that all governments said that we called to report, to measure the achievements transparently, to report on the achievements of the governments. So the template that was proposed by the Czech presidency and jointly worked with the Decade Secretariat this year was a little bit modified, and with the purpose to highlight the most important progress points in each country, as well as the outcomes of the policies and the programs. As I heard some comments today that we were shortening the presentations for sharply to 5 minutes, this is exactly why we would really focus a little bit more on listening concretely the progress points and provide space for discussion. So the lessons learned from last year was actually directing us to that way. I heard today actually that there were more proposals for further adjustments, and perhaps the issue of security might be also integrated as requested, even though it is not a pillar of the decade, but it's still a strong challenge and we are facing it every day. So this is, I would say, a task for the Secretariat to consider further modification of the report and see how security fits in. So we believe that this format can serve as a guidelines, as an example of transparent reporting on implementation of the national Roma strategies and the action plans. So considering that next year we expect that the EU member states, I assume, should report on the progress and implementation of the national Roma integration strategies up to 2020, I believe that through the Decade Progress Report template we can get to a kind of unified way of reporting. So this is what we are starting as many times, not we, but the Decade of Roma Inclusion is always starting the process, and then we are trying to transfer the experience. We would focus on strengthening the cooperation with the European Commission in order to jointly get to a report based on experiences but not experiments. This is my famous sentence, experience but not experiments. As many times up to date, the Decade of Roma Inclusion offers experiences and lessons learned to the EU framework for national Roma integration strategies up to 2020. So we strongly believe that this experience of the decade could really support the further implementation of the national strategies. And the reporting is one part of this process. Not to keep the discussion here only, I believe that discussing the progress reports on national level would also benefit the whole idea, the whole process. So now we are reporting and speaking in the ISC meeting, but it would be good also, and this is what we are planning maybe in near future, to go to the countries and really to discuss it openly with the public, with the media, the progress achieved with the civil society and so on. And this is what I would like to say about the progress points and achievements of a wider audience, which I always say that it's useful. At the beginning of May this year, we organized a workshop with the Decade of Roma Inclusion civil society representative, plus Turkey and Kosovo, if you remember, in Brussels. I see many of you who participated in this workshop. So EU enlargement expert worked closely with all of us in understanding the process of accession and the role of the Roma. I believe that we will soon follow up in working with the civil society in the EU accession countries on how to use EU mechanisms for contributing to improvement of the living conditions of the Roma, focusing on the Western Balkans, on the enlargement countries. We see the need to increase the knowledge of the decade partners on the EU opportunities. So this is what we probably will slowly focus in the next period. As you heard, Croatia is updating the national Roma strategy according to EU 2020 requirements. I would like to use this panel and encourage Macedonia, Serbia, Bosnia, Albania, and I think Montenegro already started, to consider the advantages of updating their national strategies as requested in the communication of the European Union from April last year, 5th of April, I guess it was last year, 2011. So the Decade Secretariat developed a template for the EU accession countries on how to update or how to renew their strategies, their action plans, according to the EU 2020 requirements. This is what our colleague Marton is working on. We are ready to help the rest of the accession countries to update their decade action plans according to the postulates of the communication, as I mentioned before. So it's clearly noted in point 6 in the communication, where EU enlargement countries are encouraged to update their strategies. And it was a good idea that I heard today that maybe translating the framework into the Balkan languages would also be useful. So the Decade Secretariat is also encouraging the countries, and we are ready to help this process. You may know that some of the Decade EU member states updated their Decade action plans and renamed them into operational plans of the national Roma integration strategies. I would have the case here with Bulgaria, where it was useful, as I spoke last time with Rosica, it was very useful to have the Decade action plans as a basis for updating, for creating the national Roma integration strategy up to 20. So this is very, I would say, a happy moment for the enlargement countries, that we have the basis. So we already have strategies, we already have action plans. So in a nutshell, this would be my short input on the Decade progress reports and using the EU mechanisms for contributing to the improvement of the living condition of the Roma in the EU accession countries.